For story, I give Trickster VR a 5 out of 10. As far as I can tell, there is no overall story to Trickster VR. The reason I still gave it a 5 out of 10, however, was due to the lore behind it. The world that the game takes place in has reasons for being there and has established rules. It doesn't just exist because the developers needed it for the game. It's for this world building that I still gave it a 5 out of 10 rating for the story. For addictiveness, I give Trickster VR a 3 out of 10. In my opinion, games without a story to drive them usually score low in this category. However, there are ways to keep players interested and to keep them coming back so they can finish the game. Trickster VR used 3 of these methods. The first was just general enjoyment, and I certainly did enjoy slaughtering my way through hordes of orcs. The problem is that the game's repetitiveness wore my enjoyment of the game thin quite quickly. The second way of keeping a player's interest that Trickster VR used was through progression. Adding the ability to level up and purchase upgrades added another enjoyable element to the game. Unfortunately, like the rest of the game, the progression system was quite repetitive. The differences between different upgrades on different weapons varied little, leaving its effect on the overall game minimal. The final interest-keeping tool used by Trickster VR was the ability to unlock multiple different weapons. As mentioned, the weapons could be unlocked by playing throughout different levels in the game, and then upgraded by the player. A neat point to mention is that no one weapon is necessarily better than another, it's just different. This allows you to choose your playstyle without leaving you with a massive unbalanced disadvantage, and it helps with the game's repetitiveness, although VR swords and bows will always be similar to another of their kind on some level. For replayability, I gave Trickster VR a 2 out of 10. As mentioned multiple times throughout this video so far, Trickster VR is extremely repetitive. From enemies and mission objectives to level design, everything seems to be a copy and paste of itself. There are some differences, of course. Some enemies have different abilities, but nothing that drastically changes the game, and some levels have a different layout, but they're all made from the same models with very little variation in design. And there are perhaps only 9 different objectives that pop up randomly throughout the game as well. Given that you're essentially completing the same objectives across the same level designs, I began to wonder why the developers even bothered putting so many different levels in the game. So by the time you've beaten the game, you already feel as if you've replayed the level 10 or so times, meaning you don't want to play it again. For immersiveness, I give Trickster VR a 5 out of 10. Trickster VR does a decent job of making you feel like you're actually in the game. It does this through colorful worlds and by forcing you to use VR functions, like looking over your shoulder to see if enemies are behind you and grabbing items off your belt. However, it lost some points in my opinion due to some poorly designed mechanics, which I'll discuss more in the next topic. For mechanics, Trickster VR received a 5 out of 10. Trickster VR made good use of the PlayStation VR system with the aforementioned look over your shoulder and grab items from your belt mechanics, but some other mechanics certainly could have used some smoothing out. The biggest problem mechanic was the locomotion system. Trickster VR gives you the option to teleport or smooth locomotion, but unfortunately, it puts the move and the turn buttons on the same controller, which forces you to stop moving before you turn. That means that the VR's inherently clunky movement becomes even worse. It reminds me of someone who used the hunt and peck type of method on a keyboard. The other big problem mechanic was the clipping/enemy distancing. I absolutely love that the weapons collide with weapons and with armor, but your shield becomes somewhat useless when your opponent is standing inside your shield, so those attacks are technically coming from behind your shield. I think this could be fixed though, by setting the enemies to stay 2 or 3 feet away from you, but still well within striking distance. I also want to mention that the Trickster VR gives the player access to settings that allow for height customization and draw length for your bows. Those are really neat options that I haven't seen too often in VR games. Despite Trickster VR's repetitiveness, I can still comfortably recommend it for its $15 price tag, especially given that it is an enjoyable game. Thank you for watching.